Okay, if any of you guys took me up on dissecting the owl pellet, yay, I'm so excited that you would choose to do something hands-on, and I realize that it's a little bit of a pain for you because you have to get your own owl pellet and dissect it. So I recommend first off doing this outside. Secondly, if your owl pellet is a little bit dry, adding some drops of water just inside the foil and leaving it for a little bit. Leave it for an hour or so, let it soften. And then the way that I did mine was I took a couple of toothpicks because I knew I wanted to be able to throw everything away. The other thing is wind is not your friend in this experiment because the or observation, because everything is small and wants to blow away. But I did it on a paper plate so that I could throw everything away, because hair and dirt, and you don't want it in your house, and you don't want it all over you or on anything that you're going to use again. So I thought it was great to be able to throw all that stuff away. So now I just want to take you through what you're finding inside your owl pellet. So I dissected 5, and I just kept some of the bones that I thought were the most exciting and most represented most of these different areas. I'm going to put this handout on Schoology so that you can follow along. And then what I'm looking for you to do is go ahead and categorize your bones, and I'll show you now some of the features you're looking for in order to know what bone you're looking at and to be able to determine what kind of organism you have. So here I have the skull, and this is the superior part of the skull, and in general I'm trying to lay my bones out superior to the top to inferior at the bottom, and that's not necessarily true with the skull because I have laid them out so that you could see the top. If I was doing superior to inferior, I would have them on their side there, but I think it's a little bit harder to see. But clearly in the skull you're going to see the incisors. My incisors are quite large here, and then you'll see the zygomatic arch here around the eye socket. So the cheekbone is the zygomatic arch here, and I can tell that that is a top part of a skull. Here I've lost the zygomatic arches, but I can see my orbits here, my eye sockets there. And in this one, again, I've kind of lost my teeth, but here I can see that the zygomatic arch here around the eye sockets there. So, and then these are going to be your ethmoid and sphenoid bones right in here. All right, and then we have the mandible. So the mandible is the lower bone of the jaw, I'm sure you know. And in that I can see a really prominent incisors. And this is why I believe that the animal that I have is a vole, V-O-L-E. But I can see those incisors. I can see additional teeth in here as well. And this looks like the left side of the mandible. This is the right side of the mandible. And in fact, in mammals, the mandible is fused. This is one of the common features of mammals. One of the things that mammals have in common with one another. And so I can see where this sort of broke, because they do have quite an angle here from the incisor to the ramus of the mandible at the back. So that was my mandible. And then I'm just kind of going from superior to inferior. And the reason why I have some of these in blue, like the skull and mandible, and then the ribs and the vertebra, I think that's it, is because that's axial skeleton, and then I put appendicular skeleton. And remember, the appendicular skeleton, just like in the humans, includes points of attachment for those appendages. So the pectoral girdle, which is the clavicle, and scapula, as well as the pelvic girdle that we'll look at here in a second. So the clavicle, and I can see my flat sternal end here. That is the collarbone, and it's just really, really remarkable the way, I don't know how well I can focus in. I think that's about as good as I can get. It's really amazing the homology between these bone anatomical features and our very own. So coming down a little bit, these are scapulae, and I can see in the scapula, I can see that this is going to be my medial edge here, and this is going to be my lateral edge against the shoulder, And on this one, I don't think these came from the same animal. They're not quite the same size. But here is my medial edge, and there is my lateral edge, and I can see that scapular spine sort of sticking up on the top. And then, boy, I thought this was amazing. I hope that you do too. But coming down from the scapula, now looking at the humerus. So the upper arm bone, and you'll notice, so this is a little bit different between the order Rodentia and ourselves, is that the head of the humerus is not sort of a ball. Instead, it is a little bit rough here. But check this out. First off, the deltoid tuberosity is really prominent, and this one's not so clean, but this one's very clean. Look at that deltoid tuberosity. In the humans, ours is sort of a bulging along the outside of the humerus, but here it is like a, I don't know, it's like a fin almost. But check out the trochlea. So this is the area of articulation where the trochlear notch in the ulna is going to fit and form the elbow joint. And check out this medial epicondyle here. That is the sticky outy part that you feel on your elbow, and it's so prominent and clear and obvious, even here in this rodent. So clearly I have some different bones from some different organisms here, but the homology to our own bones, I found this one to be really fascinating, especially that trochlea down there on the bottom. And then the ulna was very easy for me to pick out, because the ulna, I love that it has a U in it to remind me that it is the ulna, which also starts with a U, and you can just see that trochlear notch right there that's going to fit around that trochlea there in the humerus. So this is the ulna. I never found a radius, and it could just be that I didn't know what I was looking at, looking for, or that it was so fragile that I couldn't separate it out without breaking it. But I can clearly see the olecranon process. That's the bumpy outy place that you feel at the end of your elbow, and then the trochlear notch there. So this is clearly going to be the superior part, and then the inferior part. And then next I have a couple ribs. So the ribs also, this is like playing with fish bones. They're incredibly, incredibly fragile. The wind is wanting to blow, which is making me stress out a little bit. But anyway, so here are a couple of ribs. I think they'll be fairly obvious when you see them. Pretty cool. And then vertebra. So we thought this was super cool, that we found what we believe is the atlas here, which is C1. And you can see that, gosh, it looks so much like a human atlas. So it has the soft areas here, the facets, that articulate with the base of the skull on the occipital lobe of the skull right here. And this little notch, these are not from the same organism. This is clearly much bigger than this one, but this looks like the axis. So the atlas rotates around the dens, the sticky uppy part, on the axis. So I'm going to try and knock him back a little bit and see if I can. What if I instead just change my orientation so that you can see that dens sticking up there? So this would be an axis, and that atlas would fit right on top of this and hold the head and be able to rotate around. All right, and then I had a couple other vertebra. Probably if I had better eyes, I could tell you if these were cervical, thoracic, or lumbar, but you know what? I don't have better eyes. So these are just other vertebrae from the vertebral column. Pretty cool. So now for the lower appendage. So again, the appendicular skeleton includes the attachment site, which is going to be the pelvis. And these are whole sides of the os coxa, or pelvis. And I can show you, it's so clearly the ilium here is very different from our ilium. So we have a nice broad, right, we have that iliac fossa and the iliac crest, broad ilium that sticks up, and I put these also in a superior to inferior orientation, and we have this hole in our pelvis as well. But here our ilium is much more flattened and broad, and the ilium of all of the rodents has this long kind of spiny looking ilium that sort of sticks up and kind of moves back and forth as they walk. And then we can see, I don't know if you guys remember from anatomy, but we have an ischial, what's the word? Tuberosity. The ischial tuberosity, which is the part of your bum that you sit on, and off of our ischial tuberosity we have a spine. And so I can tell when I look at the bottom here around the circle, the ischium is going to be the part that is more broad and sort of more solid looking, and that points back toward their butt. And so I've got the ilium and then the ischium, and then this is going to be the pubis here in the middle. And in vivo, in life, the pubic bones would attach to one another with the acetabulum, which is just so clear in these, that acetabulum where the head of the femur would fit, that is going to point laterally toward the outside, so you can very quickly orient yourself. This would have been the front of the pelvis. It would have been downward facing in the rodent as it was climbing around. This would be toward the back, toward the butt, and this would be sticking up. All right, so that gets us to the femur, which also was just amazing to look at. So I'm gonna show you, you can see the head of the femur. It is a dead giveaway here. You can also see, maybe in this one, it's pretty great, the greater trochanter right there sticking out toward the side. And that would be lateral. Obviously, the head of the femur is going to point medial. And check this out. You can even see the fovea capitis. See that little dot right in the middle of the head of the femur? That's called the fovea capitis, and that you have one of those too. And that is where it's called the Terry's, the name is escaping me right now. It'll come to me in a second. Oh, the ligamentum teres. The ligamentum teres attaches to the fovea capitis, and then on the other side, it attaches to the acetabulum, and it's sort of like a rubber band that helps hold the head of the femur inside of the acetabulum. So I thought that was pretty cool because it was just incredibly obvious. And the models that I've worked with in labs in the past, in the human it's just kind of depressed there, but here they were picking up dirt and gunk, and that gunk was turning it black, which made it much more obvious even than the models that I've taught with in the past. So I thought that was pretty cool. And clearly this is going to be the superior part of the femur, and then this is going to kind of move into their knee area down here, be the inferior part. And then the tibia and fibula, theirs are fused, and so the tibia or shin bone is going to be quite broad and large, and the fibula is just kind of going to be a branch off of that because theirs fused together here at that inferior aspect, and whereas ours would be two separate bones, but here we can actually find it. And when I look at something like this, I think probably I threw out the all the radius bones that I had found with the fur, because these the supporting lower appendicular skeletal bones are, it's like almost like a little fine hair, and that is, I never found hands or feet, wrists or ankles, so that was the sum total of the bones that I found. But I thought this was super cool, looking at both the homologies and differences that we might find in different skeletal bones. So I hope that if you chose to do this lab that you really enjoyed it too, and I will put a link so that you can try to determine what type of organism you found in your owl pellet. It is most likely to be a bat, a vole, or some kind of field mouse, but many of these bone structures will be the same, and I think you'll be able to find the majority of these bones. All right, I hope you're doing well. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.